G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with the second part of Outsiders and first dog on the moon, hopefully.
And is palpable, and it's something that she is still in a position to capitalise on.
Speaking of tropes and old ones, this one put to bed overnight.
Barack Obama was born in the United States, period. Now we all want to get back to making America strong and great again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
There we go, Eleanor. In part of Donald Trump's reconstruction as a presidential contender, we are now putting to bed the whole birther history.
I mean, I have these days where I don't know how fast I can make my palm get to my face when I listen to the news, so the less said about that, the better.
Eleanor, sorry, Rebecca, was this a necessary step for Trump? I mean, he moves, and he's doing very well just now. The polling, he's getting, recovering from his previously disastrous position. Will this help?
Well, I think Donald Trump and the people who are running his campaign keep confounding those who keep writing him off. And, you'd have to say that the people who write him off are the ones who've been looking pretty foolish, as they keep saying, he won't last, he won't make it to the primaries.
Well, never has someone been so consistently underestimated.
Absolutely. So, I think I have to say, I think that the campaign comment so far that I think has been decisive is Hillary Clinton talking about the deplorables. And I think that will dog her all the way to voting day, to election day, because it's one of those things. You can attack your opponent, but once you start attacking the people who are supporting your opponent, you're attacking, the American people. It's a very bad look, and especially when there's a lot of them, So
resonances there, Sam, with their own situation with One Nation.
I think there are. I think the real interesting thing is Trump and Pauline Hanson, to an extent, they exist in that place where it's really quite hard to get at them if you're coming from the opposite side of politics, or if you have concerns with, how the discourse is being debased publicly. That frustration is palpable. It's palpable in people from the other side of the political spectrum, people from the mainstream. It's palpable in journalism. You don't know whether the best response is, to go in all guns blazing, whether that's going to inflame the situation, whether the best thing is to let the ideas and the mistruths speak for themselves. You don't want to keep throwing facts at something, but facts keep bouncing off. It's a really tricky one for people to get at.
It is tricky. I mean, the people of that part of politics are only encouraged by opposition.
They are, and I guess sometimes it feels like a wonderful exercise in misdirection, that the more attention we pay to Pauline Hanson, the less thoughtful response we make to Anna Lee's, maiden speech.
And there were a fleet of extraordinary maiden speeches this week, which painted very varying and hopeful pictures of the country. So here we are falling into the same pit as everybody else, for which I apologise. Thanks to our outsiders this morning. They have been Rebecca Weiser. You will find her writings in Spectator and Quadrant. Eleanor Jackson, you will see her work in Peril magazine. It's an Asian Australian arts and culture mag. She's a poet, performer, producer and broadcaster. Sam Hurley is from the Centre for Policy Development, a policy director there. We'll have more of that next week, but it will be with Sammy Shah in this chair. I'm away next Sunday doing Drive as of tomorrow evening. Patricia Cavella's having a week off. Lucky her. Our podcast, it's available. Good news. On the website, all the bits, the entire 3 hours if you want.
There you go. Well, Pauline Hanson resurrected with exactly the same speech as she had 20 years ago. She just filed the serial number off, painted it a slightly different colour, decided that what she really hates now is Muslims. That's who's threatening Australia. Muslims. And they're saying that it's not actually worth even trying to talk sense to her. I don't know about that. Every now and then, talking rationally and sensibly and politely to people does have good results. I had a bit of banter on a comment thread on a channel run by Channel 9 News in Perth. We're talking about how Sarah Connor is facing murder charges for terminating a policeman on Kuta Beach at Bali. And I was talking to a bloke called Wally the Wanker. And he came up with a few stock standard, pat, what I term Islamophobic responses. And I mentioned to him that I found it sort of humorous that so many Christians and Jews and atheists claimed that Muslims were really dangerous and bloodthirsty religious individuals, when, as I said to him, you know, like those three religions, plus the atheists who come out of those three religions, they all go back to the Abrahamic big three. And, you know, like a fella called Deuteronomy wrote the book of Genesis, and he said that God forbids usury, which is charging or paying interest on loans. He wasn't the first person to say it, because Zoroaster, or Zarathustra, depending on your point of view, he said that Ormazd, the one great creator God theory of the universe, forbid usury. 1,500 years before Deuteronomy ever said it. And then Moses brought down 10 commandments from that Abrahamic God theory, telling everybody how to behave, and among them was thou shalt not kill, and all the other thou shalt nots, and a few thou shalts. You know, honour thy father and thy mother, have no God but the one God. And then after Moses said that, mind you, Deuteronomy had added in that no man shall charge interest to their brother, and the Jews saw that as being a loophole, so they gave interest-free loans to other Jews, and they charged everybody else through the nose. And the Jews got kind of rich, and their neighbours got kind of sick of them. We go past Moses and his thou shalt not kill. We come on, and there was a fellow called John the Baptist who basically said Jesus is coming. And then there was Jesus, and he said, well, among other things, judge not thy fellow human, all humans are siblings, or all men are brothers. And he also threw the moneylenders out of the temple because God said thou shalt not charge interest. And then for the first 600 years of Christianity, one of the reasons the Christians really, really hated the Jews was because the Jews broke the Deuteronomy prohibition against charging interest on loans. And then Muhammad came along 600 years later, and he said to his followers that he was at the end, or the last one of, or the most recent of, depending on your translation, the most recent one of a long line of prophets. And he cited Deuteronomy, he cited Moses, he cited John the Baptist, he cited Jesus, and he said basically you have to obey everything they said before you can start listening to what I'm going to tell you. And then he pretty much reiterated what everybody else had been saying since Zoroaster. Now, I explained to this bloke that in Persia there was a poet called Baha'u'llah, and according to the Baha'i people, which is a faith or religion, Baha'u'llah said that there are as many revelations as there are people who go looking for a revelation of their own. So when they start, all religious revelations are true and correct and accurate, but then that person who has the revelation of their own comes back, tells a few other people, the other people decide they can't be bothered having their own revelation, they want to be part of the one that's already been had by their friend. And then when the person who's had that revelation dies, the movement grows and forms a religion out of it, right? So that's what Baha'u'llah said to the Baha'i, and as soon as he died, the Baha'i people formed the Baha'i faith. And because the Muslims tend to think that when Muhammad said that he came at the end of a long line of prophets, that he meant that he was the last and final prophet, the Muslims tend to persecute anybody else, including the Baha'i, who have any subsequent claim on somebody being a prophet, making revelations, telling people to get back to the tenets, to go back to obeying God's commandments. So this fellow, Wally the Wanker, said that he'd never heard any of that, and instead of telling me to stick my head up my ass and suffocate, He went off to the nearest mosque and he buttonholed somebody at the mosque and he talked to them for a couple of hours asking them questions about what they actually said they were on about, rather than going to people like Pauline Hanson and listening to her fucking Fruit Loop lunatic ravings. Oh, the Muslims are spread by the Lord, are spread by the sword, it's a violent religion. He didn't listen to any of what the white supremacists and the Islamophobes and the neo-Nazi fascists and the crony corrupt capitalists had to say, or the anti-refugee phobics. He actually asked the Muslims what they had to say, and then he went back and he told all his neo-Nazi scumbag mates what he'd learned, and they told him that he was a terrorist and a traitor and he was wicked and he was evil, and they banned him from their groups and they stopped being Facebooky friends with him and all the rest of it. And his comment was, gee, it's really peaceful now, I'm not having those idiots pissing in my ear hole all the time. So I claim one actual success in talking sense on the threads to somebody and actually appear to have turned his head around, lifted the scales from his eyes, and now he's actually seeing all people as being people. And he's not being frightened of one bunch of people because of what somebody else told him that the other bunch is thinking about doing. So, yeah, Pauline Hanson's back, and 10% of Australia voted for her. And that would not normally be enough to get a quota in the Senate, but the Greens decided to green light Malcolm Turnbull's, quote, reforms in the Senate, unquote, and therefore it was a full Senate election, and therefore you only needed 6%, not 12% to get in. So she's actually got less support now than she had 20 years ago when she got in a normal Senate election. She's got her and 3 or 4 others in there, and that's what's happening in Parliament. Out on the ground, at the grassroots, guess what happened in New South Wales? All the councils which were not previously declared to be unfit to move into the future without amalgamation or going into administration, all the councils who were actually, holding their noses above water just barely, had an election last Saturday. Glen Innes was one of the councils that passed as fit for the future. We had an election last Saturday. And Carol Sparks got elected to council on a Green Party candidate platform ticket. Glen Innes, right in the heart of Barney Baby Joyce, the inbred tomato country, in Adam Marshall country, at a state level, National Party heartlands now that Tony Windsor's had to hang up his hat and accept the fact that you go once, you don't come back. We got a Green on council. And there was a Green landslide kind of across these councils. There were 3 Green mayors were elected. Byron Bay, Bellingen and Shoalhaven Council now have Green mayors on the council. And in Byron Bay, they had a bit of a bloody upset, really, because they have above and below the line voting, so people are able to just vote number 1 above the line in the green box. Here in Glen Innes, we had to pick at least, 4 candidates, and 7 would be elected, and about 15 people stood. So we voted for everybody by name. In Byron Bay, they voted number 1 Greens, and they got 5 quotas. They could have had 5 councillors, 5 Green councillors on the Byron, but they only stood 4 bloody candidates. They had more votes than they had people to accept it with. How's that, honey bunchykins? There's so many people voting for the Greens, they didn't actually stand enough candidates. They had 4 people, 4 Green candidates, and 5 of them got in Byron Bay, including the mayor. So yeah, the times are a-changing. And instead of being scared to live in a bushfire fuel bomb in spring, we're living in a mud puddle with liquefaction of the subsoil and puddles everywhere. And yeah, it's getting a bit interesting. We didn't really think too much about it, but warm air carries more moisture. So when your warm air goes across your warm ocean, it picks up more moisture. And when it comes over the dirt, it rains more. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely? So that's what's been happening up around here. It's been raining. And we got a greenie on the council, and I'm really happy. And I've ordered a 3rd edition of the Vote Green or Die stickers because there is still actually some demand for them. Not a lot, but there's a steady little trickle of people who want a Vote Green or Die sticker. And I'm happy to supply that demand. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Have a nice Sunday. Ciao.